Hello everyone and welcome to the exclusive video for this week for OnlyFans and Patreon. Try to ignore the mess behind me. It's been a chaotic day. If you guys watched the vlog from today, you will know that Fievel just ate my eyeliner and I have just spent the last hour or so scrubbing it from underneath my fingernails, off of his entire torso, off the bathroom floor, and everything else that he touched on the way out. So it's been a crazy morning and we are gonna wind down and talk about something kind of serious, something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while. I put it on the back burner while we did the last two videos, which were videos talking about my dating life. Those were more lighthearted and fun than this video is going to be. We are going to be talking about my experience with Crohn's disease. We're going to talk about how I found out I had it, what it is, how it has affected my life, how it affected my relationships. It really affected every aspect of my life and who I am as a person, just as a whole. And I can honestly say that it is one of the worst things that has ever happened to me. And yeah, I know that sounds really fun, but it's a huge part of who I am and I am happy to share it with you guys. So stay tuned. So to start things off, I am going to put the definition of Crohn's disease up on the screen. I am doing that so that way I don't say anything wrong. It actually took me years into my Crohn's disease experience to actually have a diagnosis for Crohn's disease. I'm a little bit of a special case where I had symptoms from all three similar diseases, IBD, which is irritable bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis. I had symptoms that normally do not go, you know, from one to the other. So I was kind of just a mixture, a label. In my charts, it kind of said like parentheses, 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 all of these disorders that I could have possibly had. And then it wasn't until after my operations many years down the line that they gave me the diagnosis of Crohn's disease. And fun fact, every time I go to Stella's doctor's appointments and they ask for a health history for me, they actually say, you know, that sounds a little bit more like ulcerative colitis. So at this point in my life, I'm still having doctors question my diagnosis. So I put that definition on the screen for you guys. If you haven't heard of Crohn's disease, I know I have some fellow cronies following me, so you guys already know what's going on and what I'm going to talk about. But anyway, I also want to mention that this video could be a bit TMI. I'm going to be talking a lot about poop. I know, it's not fun. It's actually a little bit humiliating, which is why we're putting it on the personal forums for you guys to hear about. I'm also going to talk about things like puberty and bullying, and there might be some triggering subjects in this video talking about eating disorders and things like that, because like I said, Crohn's disease affected me in many, many unpleasant ways. So with all that being said, let's start from where I found out I had Crohn's disease. I still remember vividly my very first Crohn's flare-up. That is what it's called when you are experiencing your symptoms more severely than other times you may be experiencing them, to put it in a weird kind of way. But anyway, I was sitting in my 5th grade classroom towards the end of the year because most of my symptoms appeared between the summer of 5th grade and 6th grade. And I was sitting there and suddenly I was overwhelmed with the urge to go to the bathroom. I did not think I was going to make it. I had to sign out the bathroom pass that only one person could have out at a time. I had to wait for that person to get back in the room, and I swear I almost tackled them to get that little plank of wood to run to the bathroom. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought I had eaten something weird. This was the very first time I had ever experienced having to go to the bathroom so severely. So I don't think I even mentioned it to my mom until it started happening a lot more often. Up until this point, I had had no other health concerns, so it wasn't something that we had to think about, like, oh my gosh, you might actually be sick. It was just like, yeah, you're having some tummy troubles, you're probably just not eating very well. So we had actually planned a trip to Disney World that summer, and my mom had stocked up the suitcase full of Pepto-Bismol, Imodium, things that were basically anti-diarrhea medications. And so they kind of just planned on giving me those throughout the trip, but unfortunately it did not work out. So I spent the entirety of that vacation running from bathroom to bathroom. My parents were actually really mad at me because they didn't really understand the severity of the situation at the time. My dad was like, I spent so much money on this trip and we're spending it all in the bathrooms. We just went, you're gonna have to hold it. And what they didn't understand is when it comes to Crohn's disease, you really can't hold it. I had several accidents that trip that I was honestly made fun of quite a bit for it. It still comes up at like family barbecues and stuff. And like I said, Crohn's disease really affected every aspect of my life, and that includes my relationships with my family, as it's going to come up several times in this video. I'm the only person in my family that has Crohn's disease. No one really can understand what I was going through at this time. And since I was going from being basically a child to a preteen and a teenager throughout this entire journey, I was feeling things a lot more hard than I think I would have if I was experiencing it now as a more mature adult. So this was an extremely hard time for me. I remember feeling so distant from my family at this point in time, and I remember feeling embarrassed because it's not a pleasant situation to be pooping your pants at Disney World and having your family have to run to the gift shop to buy you new Tinkerbell sweatpants. So yeah, I'm making light of it a little bit, but it was an incredibly difficult time for me. When we got back from the trip, my parents almost threatened to take me to the doctor instead of being like, oh honey, you are clearly very ill, let's take you to the doctor. They're like, that's it, we're taking you to the doctor. I remember this very vividly. So we did end up going to my pediatrician. Keep in mind, I'm literally a child at this point. I'm like 10 years old. I go to the pediatrician and he basically says what everyone else was thinking, like, you know what, you're probably just not eating very well and it's upsetting your stomach. There might be like an allergy, like a gluten allergy or something. We're gonna figure it out. So we're gonna put you on this very bland diet called the brat diet. And I can never fully remember what this diet consists of. I believe it's like bread, rice, applesauce, and then I forget what the T stands for. I kind of thought it stood for toast, but if the B stands for bread, isn't that kind of like counterintuitive or kind of like the same thing? So basically they put me on this very bland diet and they said, this is all you're gonna eat, and hopefully whatever foods are triggering your stomach to be so upset, we're gonna find out what they are once we start giving you your foods back after you're done with this bland diet. So went on the brat diet, no difference. In fact, things started getting much worse. I started bleeding every time I went to the bathroom, and it started off not very much blood, just a little bit at a time, a couple drips. I actually thought at the time that I was getting my period. So I remember bringing my mom into the bathroom and just being like, look. And I remember her saying, well, what is this? And I was like, well, I think I got my period. And my mom, being the way that she is, she called all of my relatives and she was like, Juliana got her period. It was horrible. It was a mortifying experience for me. Like I said, I was a preteen and I was just embarrassed by everything at this point in time. But I remember my mom calling everyone and saying I got my period. She gave me a basket of pads. I was wearing pads for weeks and weeks because I kept bleeding every time I went to the bathroom, which was about 20 times a day. And I never got any blood on the pad. But being an ignorant child at the time, I didn't realize that that's not what periods were like. So gradually the blood starts increasing from a couple drips to a couple tablespoons to eventually when I was losing cups and cups of blood. And no one really knew the extent of what was happening to me until one day I couldn't flush the toilet. It was clogged or something and I had to ask for help. My mom came in the bathroom and she was like, that is not normal. So then we went back to the pediatrician who referred me to a GI, which stands for gastrointro... I cannot say this word. I'm gonna put it on the screen because I'm gonna butcher it so horribly. Know that I know this word, I just cannot make my tongue say it. So I started going to a GI and the GI said, all right, we're gonna give you a colonoscopy and an endoscopy, which is where they take a tube with a camera on the end of it. They put one down your throat after you've been put under, and then one up your butt, and they check out your colon and your esophagus and your stomach and everything that's going on the inside. So that is what we ended up doing. Colonoscopies are normally an inpatient procedure. They're very quick. It doesn't take long at all. You get pretty much instant results after your doctor has gone through the colonoscopy. They are able to, you know, just come talk to you after the procedure, and just if everything looks fine, then you go home immediately. But in my case, the pictures were showing that things were so severe that I actually had to take an ambulance to the Children's Hospital in Chicago, which at the time was called Children's Memorial. So if you're familiar, that's where I was treated throughout most of my illness. And I had to stay there for a couple weeks actually, because things were so bad on the inside. The inflammation was severe. My blood loss was severe. I was extremely anemic. I was underweight from going to the bathroom 20 times a day. I was incredibly dehydrated because, as you know, diarrhea does, you lose a lot of your hydration. So for the next following weeks that I was in the hospital, you know, we were coming to find out that something was actually severely wrong with me. So I immediately was put on an IV treatment of a steroid called prednisone. Remember that, because that is something that I really think contributed to a lot of the issues that I have in life now. Actually, I know for a fact that it has. Just health concerns that I have right now. It affected my appearance. Prednisone has some certain symptoms like it makes your face swell and your cheeks become very round. I gained a lot of weight. I suddenly went from being like severely underweight to borderline overweight, and at the same time it stunted my growth and put off my puberty. So I was only 4'11" going into high school even. So yeah, prednisone was my worst enemy, but that is actually also something that ended up saving my life in the long run because of how bad my inflammation and everything was on the inside. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Now that we knew that something was severely wrong, this began my journey of constant trips to the hospital, inpatient trips, outpatient trips, monthly colonoscopies, different trial medications with a whole slew of symptoms that were almost worse than how I was feeling before we started medicating me. I remember taking this little red pill twice a day. Sometimes I was on like 9 to 16 pills every morning just to try and make it through the day. And some of these pills had horrible, horrible side effects. Like the red pill would make me vomit, almost like morning sickness throughout the entire day. Or if I was lucky, I'd vomit up the pill and I could go on with my day a little bit. I ended up missing so much school. It's honestly a miracle that they let me graduate. My report card was full of M's for medical instead of A, B, C, you know, F, D, F. So yeah, it affected my education. I was very sick all the time. My friends eventually stopped inviting me out places because, I mean, who wants to hang out with a girl who has to spend most of the time in the bathroom? Also, like I said, the prednisone altered my appearance, so I was starting to get bullied. We couldn't go out in public without people like looking at me and saying things about me, and it just became a horrible, horrible experience for everyone involved. So I was feeling very isolated. I had only one real friend who stuck with me throughout this, who is still my friend to this day. And yeah, it was really, really rough. I was going for weekly blood tests to make sure that my nutrition was good because, like I said, I was still bleeding. They were still trying to get control of that, and I was losing a lot of nutrients from my body. Basically, just every time I ate, it came right out, to say this in a I don't know any cute ways to talk about diarrhea, guys. So long story short, none of the medications that they were giving me worked, and this is over the course of several years. From like age 9 to age 13, I was trying new medications every month, all with different horrible symptoms. Then we started trying more extreme things, like Remicade treatments. Remicade is an IV treatment that I would have to go to the hospital for on a bi-weekly basis, and I would have to sit there for, I believe it was like 2 hours or something, while I was on an IV drip, giving me this medication that was supposed to help. Thankfully, my dad's insurance was very, very good because this treatment was extremely expensive. Also, correct me if I'm wrong if you've ever gotten this treatment, but I believe I have read before that Remicade is actually a form of chemo. So I don't know, take that as you will, but it's a very intense treatment. When all of this was not working, they actually were running out of solutions for me, and things were getting really severe, and we were in crunch time because the prednisone that I had been on for so long was starting to deteriorate my body. I was going in for regular bone density scans because I was showing signs of early osteoporosis. My bone density was becoming less and less. I was starting to see a kidney doctor among many other specialists. I had to see an endocrinologist. I hope I said that right. I had to be checked up on about my puberty because I was not getting a period and all my friends were, and my growth was being stunted. And yeah, it was just a horrible, horrible experience. I also developed bursitis in my hips, which would flare up and it would feel like someone lit my hips on fire. and I would have to pull down my pant leg and lay on the cold tile floor, and that was the only thing that would make it feel better. And on top of that, I was just going through a really rough time in my life. So they had to get me off the prednisone, and we were running out of things to do. The final straw was going to be surgery, but before they did that, they wanted to try one more experimental technique, and that was the elemental diet. And this really screwed me up. Essentially what the elemental diet is you are not allowed to eat anything. The only thing that I was allowed to have were these basically pre-digested shakes. They were like Slim Fast shakes, but they were broken down as much as you possibly could break down a food substance, so that way my body could have a break. And that was kind of the idea behind it, was to just give my system a break, and then maybe we could introduce foods back in slowly, and then we could find out what foods really triggered my Crohn's disease. But that's not really how things ended up working out, which is why I ended up having the surgery. But this diet was the worst thing for a teenage girl. I was not able to eat, and so eventually friends stopped inviting me places because they felt bad about eating in front of me. I went through family holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, where I would sit in another room while my family sat in the dining room and ate together. I got so obsessed with food that I started hoarding it in my bedroom. I wasn't eating it, I was just collecting little non-perishable things with the intention of eating all of it when I was allowed to eat. I kept journals of just, oh my gosh, I saw a really good sandwich today that I want to try when I can eat. I started baking for my family just to be able to like interact and touch food. The shakes that they made me drink were so horrible. Because it's really hard to flavor something and have it still be like in a pre-digested shake form. So like they didn't have real sugar or anything. It was all artificial. It was basically just this vitamin drink. It was horrible. I don't even know how to explain it. It tasted like someone ground up chalk and then added like a bubblegum flavoring to it, because they had horrible kids flavors. There was bubblegum, creamsicle, there was like a chocolate one and a vanilla one, but they all basically tasted like cough syrup, medicine, and chalk. So I ended up losing a lot of weight because I wouldn't even drink my shakes. I would take them with me to friends' houses on the rare occasions that I was well enough to go visit my friends, or if they wanted to see me, and I would dump them out as I walked to my friends' houses. So I lost a lot of weight, and I started becoming really obsessed with my weight, because keep in mind the prednisone that I was on made me gain a bunch of weight. So suddenly I started seeing the weight fall off, and it made me feel good, like at least this one thing I can control, like I'm getting skinny, and maybe people will stop making fun of me, and maybe I'll start losing the weight in my face that the prednisone caused. And it was just a really hard time. I was so obsessed with food. Once they finally realized that elemental diet was not working for me, that I was still going to the bathroom constantly, I was still losing blood, and surgery was the only option, and they took me off the elemental diet, I started a binge eating and purging disorder. So that is really one of my biggest regrets in life. I wish that they had never put me on that diet. So finally, at the age of, I think, 12 years old, 12 or 13, I had my first operation. I had my entire large intestine removed. I had some of my small intestine removed, and then I had the majority of my rectum removed, which is the base of your colon/large intestine. So it was a very intensive surgery. I was in the hospital for a very long time. Recovery was brutal. Cutting through all of your abdominal muscles and then recovering from that is one of the most painful things I've ever gone through. Makes childbirth look so easy. And that was my first surgery, first of 3. And when I woke up from that surgery, I had something called a colonoscopy bag, or not a colonoscopy bag, an ostomy bag, an ileostomy. And that is where the base of your small intestine is basically hanging out of your abdominal wall, and you have a bag on the outside that collects all of your waste. So I no longer had to go to the bathroom because it's all collected in an external bag outside of my body. And again, as a teenage girl with body image issues already, this was something I was so unbelievably embarrassed about. And I want to say that throughout my entire treatment, doctors were really only talking to my mom. I feel like doctors really dumbed it down for me. They didn't really take the time to explain it in ways that a child would understand. So I was really just taking whatever pills handed to me. I was never really given options about my treatment. It was just like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. And yeah, it was horrible. And so when I woke up from that surgery and I had an ostomy bag, I honestly wanted to die. No one had prepared me for seeing one of my organs hanging out of my body. And I remember feeling sick looking at myself. And I was very, very depressed for the entirety of the time that I had my ostomy bag. If you're wondering what an ostomy looks like, I definitely recommend Googling it for yourself. I'm not gonna put it in this video for anyone who doesn't wanna see it, but it's pretty gruesome. It's literally a piece of your intestine hanging out of your body that essentially poops into a bag. It was disgusting. No offense to anyone who has one, but I mean, poop itself is disgusting is what I'm trying to say. And taking care of the bag was not a responsibility that I wanted as a 13-year-old girl. And I actually had that bag going into high school as well. So when I was in the locker room for school, I would have to change. And luckily the bag that I wore was like a flesh colored Band-Aid looking situation. So when I was changing in the locker room, girls would be like, what's that? And I'd say, oh, it's a Band-Aid. And I would purposely wear clothes that would cover it. I wore baggy things a lot so that way no one could see it as the bag like inflated throughout the day. And yeah, it was just a really, really bad experience. But luckily, after everything on the inside had healed enough, I was able to have my second and third operations, I believe my sophomore year of high school, or in between freshman and sophomore year. And that surgery was to take my small intestine and create a loop called the J pouch, which acts like an artificial colon in your body. And they connect that to the little bit of rectum that was left. And now I can use the bathroom like a normal person, almost. I still honestly go a lot more often than the regular person would, but I'm not going 20 times a day, and the sense of urgency is much, much less. So in the long run, the surgery is the best thing that has ever happened to me, aside from my kids. But health-wise, and my body personally, it is one of the best decisions that was ever made for me, getting the surgery. And I'm gonna show you my scars. I don't know if you guys are really that interested, but I'm gonna show it to you anyway, because this has been cut open 3 times now. So here is my first surgery scar. This is where they cut through 3 times. So this scar used to be much thinner, now it's much thicker because it's been a lot. This is where my ostomy bag used to be. As you can see, it looks like I got in a knife fight. And then I do have this tattoo that says, lose your clothes and show your scars. It's kind of my way of being like proud of my body and how it looks and everything. So yeah, surgery was awesome. Since then, I've been in remission pretty much. I do have some symptoms of Crohn's disease still because I do not absorb the liquid from my food, because that's the job of your colon, is to absorb some of the vitamins and the hydration from your food, which is why your poop is solid, because the colon takes the liquid out of it. So I have chronic dehydration, chronic fatigue, and also I still have some remnants of my bursitis in my hips. It flares up sometimes. I do have bad bone density. The beginning signs of osteoporosis. I started showing signs of cataracts in my eyes, which is another reason why they took me off prednisone. And just overall, have a lot of underlying things that happened from all of the medications that I was on for a very long time. I do still have issues with body image, and I do obsess about my weight a lot. It's gotten much better since I started having kids and realizing, like, you know what, there's more important things to life than how you look. So I no longer binge and purge. I do binge here and there, but it's more in like a, I love to watch reality TV and sit down and eat a whole bunch kind of thing. It's no longer me hiding in my room with no friends and just eating and eating and eating until I feel sick, which is something I used to do when I was younger. But maybe I can do a whole different video about my eating disorder issues and struggles. I don't want this video to be too triggering for anyone who might currently suffer. But I think that's everything I wanted to say in this video about my Crohn's disease. Like I said, I'm somewhat in remission at this point in time, and I am very lucky to be alive and to have had that operation. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If this was kind of scattered, I apologize. This isn't something that I really talk about all that much. There are friends and family members that very much are unaware about how severe this disease was for me and how much it's affected me mentally, physically. It's affected my education, my relationships, and just everything. I actually did talk to a therapist about it. I had 2 appointments, and then my mom, who I do not have a good relationship with, said that if she wasn't allowed to sit in on my appointments, then I wasn't allowed to go anymore, and she stopped taking me. So that's kind of where I went with that. But I don't know why I'm getting into this, but anyway, just wanted to let you guys know that Crohn's disease affected me in a very hard way, and that is how I found out I had it, the treatments that we took, and where I'm at right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video next Wednesday.